So let's just say it's 50-50. Let's say there's a 50% chance that there is a God and a 50% chance that there isn't a God. Now we've got to do a little bit more fancy math to figure out the average. So we've got to do a chance at an infinite reward is going to happen half the time, so infinity times 50% or divided by 2, and then half the time we're going to get that negative 100 cost. So negative 100 times a half is going to be negative 50. Well, what's infinity times a half? Well, it turns out infinity times a half is still infinity, because infinity times anything, as long as we're multiplying it by a finite number, is still going to be infinity. So we're still going to be left with an average outcome of infinity. And of course the same is going to apply at the bottom, but let's change the odds even more so that it's a really, really unlikely chance. Like maybe heaven is really unlikely. Maybe there's only 1 in 1,000 chance, 0.1% chance. And maybe 99.9% of the time there's not going to be a God. So we do that math. Again, 1 divided by 1,000 times infinity is still going to be infinity. No matter what number you multiply infinity by, as long as that number is still finite and not infinitesimal, you're still going to be left with infinity, and infinity minus any finite number, however large, is still going to be infinity. And it turns out that that's going to be true for any number that is not 0% that you multiply by infinity. As long as you can't guarantee that there's no God, as long as there's still some kind of minute possibility that there's a God, then the possible reward of heaven is going to outweigh any negative cost that happens if you believe and there is no God, as long as it's finite. And again, as everything we just said here applies to the second row as well, the row that says you don't believe in God. The same is going to apply when we multiply anything by negative infinity. We're still going to be left with negative infinity. So the upshot of all of this, according to Pascal, is that we have this potential infinite reward of heaven. And no matter how small a chance we have at that infinite reward of heaven, that tiny chance at heaven outweighs even the largest chance of a finite reward while we're here in our lives on earth. Even a small chance at an infinite reward outweighs a large chance at a finite reward. That's the fundamental principle underlying Pascal's wager. In other words, it is in your interest, practically speaking, to believe that there is a God. You have little to lose, just a little bit of time and freedom here on earth, and you have so much possibly to gain. By the way, you probably have some things here on earth to gain, like comforting existence, a nice life with other fellow believers, good, strong relationships with those other religious people. All those sorts of things are also practical benefits here on earth. But not only do you have those definite practical benefits, you also have the possible practical benefit of an eternity in heaven in the afterlife. That is an awesome potential reward. In this case, the potential rewards of believing that there's a God outweigh the potential rewards of not believing that there's a God. And it also turns out to be true in reverse. The potential negatives or downside or costs of not believing there's a God outweigh the potential costs of believing that there's a God, right? The drawback of not believing is hell. That's the worst case scenario. If you don't believe there's a God and you guessed wrong, that's a huge potential negative cost. And the only negative you get if you're wrong when you believe there's a God is that you waste some time here on earth. You still get to do a lot of the same projects, live basically the same kind of life. You just went to church a little bit when you shouldn't have, prayed a little bit when you shouldn't have, done whatever it is you're supposed to do if you believe in God, and you didn't have to do that. So that is Pascal's wager in a nutshell. The next lecture, we're going to focus on evaluating this argument, see if it's any good. We're going to focus particularly on 3 criticisms of this argument. I'll see you then.